Count money, man. Stack riches. Try and told him I'm a beast, bud.
What's up, gang? Welcome back to another episode of the GRINDcast. Get ready. It's a new day, and we have living legend, Coach Timmy Tyrrell, out of the Akron Hoban. Also is a native of Youngstown, Ohio. I believe the north side.
Yep, north side.
Ohio. Played at my alma mater at Ursuline, was a tight end at Ursuline, and then also at Youngstown State under Tressel in the 90s. And now has played or has coached in, was it 8 state titles, and has won 5 state titles at Akron Hoban. So in the last 9 years, you've been to 8 state title games. Is that right?
That is correct.
Unbelievable. Well, congratulations on a journey that I haven't heard many people that have been able to emulate that level of success and leadership and in coaching. So why don't we, start out? Could you give us a little snapshot of how did you get into coaching? What made you get into coaching, and what does that journey look like for you? I think people see the outcome, of 8 state championships, but I know there's had to been a process journey to it.
There's definitely been a process. Well, I played at Youngstown, and then right out of college, Coach Tress, I guess, saw something in me and really talked to me really a lot my whole senior year about coaching. I think I just enjoyed the stuff that coaches enjoy, like film study and the back end of things that players necessarily don't like. So started coaching right out of college. Was blessed that he hired me on his staff as a GA, kind of moved myself up to the tight ends tackles position. When Coach Tress left to go to Ohio State, I moved on. I really wasn't looking to get into being a head coach in high school. I kind of just wanted to make a little bit of money, and I became an AD in the Canton area at St. Thomas Aquinas, and the coach left out of nowhere in July, and the principal looked at me and said, "You're going to be the coach and AD." So it was my first experience in high school. Really liked it. Was not the most successful coach in the world. Still, a lot of college coaches I've learned over the time, the transition from college to high school is harder than people think. I thought I knew everything, because I learned under one of the best of all time, and just thought that's how things work. And really wasn't a player's coach, was kind of more of a dictator at a young age. 25 years old as a head coach, thought, wasn't the greatest coach in the world. I still apologize to all the players I had my first 3 years of coaching. I hire them. I take them to dinners. I do all the kind of stuff. I'm still apologizing for that. But kind of learned as I went, spent 5 years there. Went down to South Florida because I knew a little bit of the area from recruiting when I was at Youngstown. Got into a good situation at Chaminade Madonna, who's obviously, top 5 in the country right now. A bunch of kids they send to Ohio State and all over the country. Went into there at a low point for them. So I was able to rebuild it the way I wanted to. And the school had my back. What's that?
How long were you there?
I was there for 5.5 years, almost 6 seasons.
Okay.
Had a great experience. Learned probably the most I've ever learned about coaching down in South Florida. Anybody that's ever played football, you always play with someone from South Florida, so it's a different way of thinking. And they're not producing always the number one offensive lineman or defensive lineman all the time. They got skill out the wazoo. So you kind of learn that dog mentality a little bit with the skill players down there. Learn how to coach really, really high-profile kids. Got some kids in the NFL and have gone pretty far. So I learned a lot. I learned how to become a very disciplined coach, but more of a player coach when I was down there. And then just had an opportunity, was married when I was down there to a Canton girl. My wife wanted to have kids and kind of agreed she wanted to be around her mom when that happened. So I was trying to buy as much time as possible because we were loaded at Chaminade. So, but Coach Tress as he does, kind of inserted himself into my life again at that point, and knew some people up in Akron. Kind of talked me into coming up a year earlier than I kind of wanted to. And Hoban really, reached out to me and really wanted to be good in football. So took a shot. They were down to a little bit at the time. Ralph Orsini, who's an unbelievable man, great coach, was retiring at the time. But they were a little bit of a low point too. So I like restarting programs. Everyone loves to go into an automatic situation where they already have great players and doing things. I like the restart side of things, kind of make it your own. So then came here and, have had some great administrations. It's changed over the years. They've moved on to better jobs, but they seem to keep hiring great people here at Hoban.
How long have you been at Hoban?
Just finished my 11th year.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been here 11 years, the longest I've ever been anywhere.
So it took you a couple years then to
yeah, third year we won our first state championship in school history in the third year. I think that's your aiming point as a coach, a new coach. If you can't get it by year 3, you probably shouldn't be at that school. If they want to be good at football, and so I told him if we ain't good by, I didn't think state championship. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't like betting on myself for a state championship year 3, but it worked out. The kids bought into what I wanted to do philosophy wise and build the culture that way. So put some great coaches around me, great assistants, and the core of them have been with me ever since. So we've got it going pretty good at Hoban, and it's become a very popular place and become a kind of a national brand now. So we're part of the Nike Elite group, which is your top 40 high schools in the country in Nike's eyes. So it's gone really well since I've been here.
I got to try to get down to a game this year.
Yeah, we play a tough schedule. We're independent, so we play a lot of national teams and get some teams next year where I get some TV games and some different things like that. So it's an interesting thing. Not being a huge school, we're only got 800 kids in the school. Or more smaller side of our division, Division 2. So, but it's been successful.
So I got a couple tips from Coach Tress before I was going to have you on here. I said, give me a couple bullet points. He said that you already had leadership ability while you were playing there. He said you were a great leader even while you were at Youngstown State. In what was that, 97?
97 was my senior year. We won the national championship my senior year.
Okay. So you're starting to see these winning traits. You're on a championship team, and now you're coming out and winning titles, like this. One of the things that you mentioned was that you turned into more of a player's coach, that in the beginning you were more of a dictator and then you transitioned into a more of a player's coach. Explain to me or other young coaches, what do you mean by that? How do you do that?
So the term player's coach kind of gets used the wrong way. I think, when people hear player coach, they think of buddy or someone that's really in with the players. That player coach to me means that there's a trust and there's a respect back and forth. It's just not one person talking and doing, and it's always their way. So I put a lot of leadership. I learned a lot from obviously Coach Tress, and he always did that. In my first years, I thought I knew more than everybody because I was coming out of a great program, and everyone got to listen to me. And I kind of was doing
a couple years before.
I was kind of doing the opposite of what I was taught. So as I started to go along, I always have a philosophy: happy players, when they're happy and they're playing the position they want to play, and they have the chance to play, at young ages, then the player works a little bit harder for you. So they all want to run through that wall for you, but when they know you have their back, while still keeping everything very, very disciplined and on time for everything. Obviously, that's something we all learn. If you've ever been around Jim Tressel, if its meeting starts at 10 o'clock and you get there at 10, you're late. So the discipline is there. It really helps the kids future wise, but they have to have a voice with the coach. They have to be able to walk in your office and talk to Tim Tyrrell, not Coach T. So, when they're coming in, I always ask them, "Are you talking to Timmy? Or are you talking to Coach?" And this is a Tim Tyrrell talk. So you got to be man to man with some of these kids, and because they're all coming from different backgrounds.
How do you maintain the balance of having the discipline and authority, but also that relationship to where you have that player's coach?
They just know the standard. So we have roles. So anytime it's a work area, for example, if we're on the field, I always say in between the lines, you're never dealing with Tim Tyrrell as a man. Your coach. This is Coach T time. So you got to leave everything behind. I'm leaving any problems I got it in my personal life behind. When we're on the field, we're on the field. When we walk over the track, all of a sudden I become Tim Tyrrell again, and my arm goes around you, and we'll talk about issues you have at home. We talk about, did you eat breakfast this morning? Does the family not have enough money? His parents gone away on a vacation, all the different things high school kids go through right now, social media issues, all that kind of stuff. We talk about outside the lines. Same thing with the weight room in an off season. Like you're there to work. You're there to be the best you possibly can be. And to teach them. The hardest thing for kids to realize nowadays, and to parents to trust you, to not be the nicest individual in the world to your kid is everybody has that ceiling. We all went through it as players that, you come out of practice and thinking, okay, I did all right. I did a good practice. And for them to realize good is not good enough. Our goal is not, we lost the state championship this year in a very close game. A lot of programs would celebrate that. Like, you got to the state championship. Our kids didn't even get a T-shirt. It ain't good enough. We're not celebrating second. So and the kids realized that. They were more mad. The juniors were coming back, and you have to have a certain amount of days off before you hit the weight room again, for health reasons and the state rules and stuff. They wanted to fight our strength coach and me as a coach, and what they can't lift on Monday after they just played a state championship on Thursday because they were so mad they got second.
Wow.
7-2 game. Yeah, we lose in the last 50. We could have won a game in the last 53 seconds, and it was already moved on. So, but they understand that the ceiling they think they have, my job and my staff's job is to punch them through about 10 more ceilings, because their goal is, when they come to Hoban to play football, they want to play college football at whatever level that is. Could be John Carroll, could be Ohio State, could be USC, could be Florida, wherever it is. We want them to be college ready. So they're not getting redshirted. They're physically good, and more importantly, they're mentally good. So that's always a hot topic nowadays. How do you treat kids because of the mental? I've learned, Simon, that nothing has changed with kids when it's strictly just the kids you're dealing with from when I was with you in 1998 compared to, when I was playing in the early 90s. Kids are the same thing when you break them down, and they want what they want. You got to set goals, and you got to set attainable goals with them. They're no different. Everyone's always saying they're soft nowadays. Kids aren't soft. Kids are tough as they always have been. You just got to. There's different ways to break it down now because of social media and how the world works right now. But kids are still kids in a weight room, on a football field, and doing all that type of stuff.
So you mentioned you enjoy the process of building from the ground up versus taking over a successful program. Walk me through what your thought process would be, or coach somebody through what the steps would be to build a winning culture from the ground up, going into a losing situation to a winning situation, much like I've seen happen with Ursuline.
Oh yeah, for sure. Obviously Coach Reardon, he knows what he's doing. We all kind of came from the same cloth, obviously, and have different philosophies how to call play, but it's still the same way of doing things. So when I always tell young coaches now, because a lot of them come and talk to me, a lot of them come to watch practices in the playoffs and doing things, and they always ask me that question, like, well, so how did you do it? How do you do this? And they're always talking to me about trying to get the best players. And I always tell you, players come the good players come to you because of your atmosphere and because of your culture. You don't go get them to create your culture. So, the first thing I do is everybody wants to have the PlayStation type coach that can call a play, and the gurus of football. You see it in college and the NFL, especially NFL. Like, some of those guys can't coach their way out of a paper bag in an individual, but they can call a play. So, I try everywhere I've been that I've restarted, the last 3 schools I've been at, to restart and kind of build, is I try to surround myself with great men in the community, in different parts of the community, that are faith-based. I don't care what faith, but they're faith-based. They've been a dad. Some of them are older, some of them are younger. They have kids, and they're well known inside of their own community. That they're good men. They know the game of football, but they realize they don't know everything. So I start with my staff, and I surround the school and different guys from different sides of towns and different things, and I base it upon, I'll coach you on the plays and individual and what to do on things like that, but your players have got to trust you. Your players have got to buy into you. So that kid's going to come back in 20 years and give you a hug and tell stories and do all those types of things, good, bad, ugly stories, and being tough on them and everything else like that. But they know they can call you at midnight when something bad happens. So I don't need a bunch of coaches that can think they know everything. I sprinkle those young coaches in every year, and they're usually the ones that last 2-3 years and then want to be a coordinator somewhere else. But that's how I first do it. And then the second thing I always do is at every school I've been at, is concentrate on the off season. How is teaching these kids how hard they actually have to work outside of just the season, and what that takes to be known as the greatest. And you want to be able to compete with the class that came before you. We're the greatest team in the school history. And it's just a constant competition, and getting the competition out of kids, because that is what is different nowadays from when we grew up, is we had the little video games and stuff like that, but it wasn't the aspect it is now, is getting them that work ethic, that you have to be training harder than the person next to you. So I learned one of the greatest quotes I've ever heard, that when I was with Tressel, it wasn't one of his quotes. It was Zig Ziglar. He used to, make us all read books and different things like that. It wasn't just all football. And kids hate hearing me say it, but I say it all the time. Whether we won a state championship the year before, we were 1-9. You'll be 16-0, doesn't matter. If it ain't broke, break it. I hate the saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That means all that does is let someone catch you. So we're just constantly, I remember when I started here, we were 5-5 my first year at Hoban, and I thought that was the greatest coaching job anybody has done in my 23 years of coaching, because I don't know how we won 5 games. I mean, it was smoke and mirrors. But the kids bought into the work ethic. And I always look back at that 2013 class, and they don't have a ring like a lot of the other classes, but I tell them they're the reason that 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, all those runner-ups, all those teams won, is because they bought in to the work ethic side of things, where when people aren't looking, you have to work. When someone thinks and wants to celebrate you, we're nice. The parents celebrate and do everything else like that. But we win a state championship. We have a banquet in January. The minute that banquet's over, we're not allowed to talk about the state championship. It's over. We're breaking things we did the year before, and the coaches and kids get mad. They're like, but this worked last year. I don't care. It worked. We're changing something. Someone is chasing you. Someone is trying to beat you, and they're sitting in a weight room saying, we're doing this and we're out working Hoban because we're going to beat them next year. And it's just, my wife thinks it's a sickness. Like, she thinks something's wrong with me sometimes.
There is. You got to be like that in order to win at the level that you're winning at right now consistently. I was going to ask you, how do you maintain, as a mentor of mine, Tressa was always telling me that it was easier to get people to buy into the work that it required coming off of a losing season, which I think he told me you guys did. You had a season or two where it wasn't the standard, and that set up the championship mindset. And he was always telling me it's easier because success can be a bad teacher. So I think it's a huge challenge, you know, when you've already won and you've been winning, how do you keep that level so high and keep that level of consistency?
You know, I think the biggest thing that we try to do as a staff, and the kids again, the hardest thing is every coach can do what they want and say what they want. But if you don't, and this is what I always try to tell the young coaches, because they always come back to me and, oh, this didn't work. I said, but you say it, but you don't practice it. So, you know, it's one thing to say something to a kid. You know as well as the neighborhoods we grew up in. I mean, Youngstown's infamous, but I mean, I grew up off Elm Street on Saranac. And then I got rich and moved 3 streets down to Brookline. Like, I always joke about that. Yeah, we got rich and moved 3 streets close to the Gypsy. Like, the mindset that kids see through the fake. So you just preaching something and doing something, you know, my players think something's wrong with me because they'll come out of a workout and I'm like, that wasn't good enough. You know, that's not good enough. So, you know, and they're like, but coach, this, but I practice what I'm preaching. So I try, unless I have the biggest meeting in the world to do it, I don't miss lifts. I have a strength coach, but I'm at the lifts too.
Wow.
You know, we're constantly, you know, when we're having meetings, I'm in the defensive meetings. I have the greatest defensive coordinator in the state of Ohio. He's awesome. We're always in the top 2. And, you know, but I want the defensive players. I'm calling the offensive plays, but I sit in the defensive meetings because I want those players to understand. I believe that the only way we win a state championship is if your defense is the best in the whole state of Ohio. So I give the defense the best players. I'm the offensive guy. So if I'm not practicing what I preach, then kids don't buy in. So, you know, we just live by that philosophy of constantly changing and really living by the saying, this is how you keep going, I think. You know, and again, this isn't me reinventing the wheel. No one does that. But I've heard Nick Saban say over and over and over again, whether he's at LSU or Alabama, was you have to become very comfortable being uncomfortable. So, you know, I constantly preach that with the kids. You can think you just had the greatest practice or the greatest workout in the world, and all of a sudden the head coach is in your ear ripping you about the smallest footstep, or you didn't get low enough on a squat, or, you know, where I want your hands on the inside. You know, you let the linebacker let the kid block you too long. It should have been a negative play, but, you know, you got him on the line of scrimmage and you think you did well and everyone's patting you on the head. So the more you keep them uncomfortable, to me, the more you challenge them in the off season, they believe in what you're saying because you're actually doing it instead of just getting up in a pregame, you know, preseason talking about it. You didn't do it for the last, you know, 200 and some days in a workout situation. You just came in and showed up, and all of a sudden you're going to call some plays you think it's going to work.
Right.
I think the good young coaches nowadays that are coming up and doing it are really practicing what they preach. No matter what the philosophy is, kids buy into what you're saying if you do it. So I think that's how you maintain that is you never let them feel comfortable.
I think it sticks out to me just saying that you're present in the weight room sessions. I think a lot of people would delegate, you know, but just you being present shows how important that it is and how hands-on, you know, that you are. I know how taxing, you know, it could be to win, you know, at that level. You know, if you're teaching during the day, or if you got it, you know, and then right after that you got practice, you know, during the season, you know, what do you think, you know, give me an example of what your schedule would look like, you know, during in season, you know, while you're coaching in season. What does that schedule look like?
Geez. Well, number one, you got to have honestly, and this is a problem with a lot of young coaches. And this is how it all starts.
The right woman. You got to have the right wife.
You have got to have you got to have a great wife. And you have to have. If you don't have that, then you don't. I got a lot of young coaches that come in and they want to be this and they want to be that, and they're talking to me about being a head coach. And I always tell them, I'll train you to be a head coach if you want to be a head coach. And the first thing I do, I just did it with a young offensive lineman, a coach that's going to be my own line coach this year, and he's great. He played for me. He won a state championship 2015, and he's all excited how much what he's going to do. And I said, I don't need to talk to you. I need to talk to your wife. You just got married, and I'm like, we're having a meeting. Not with you. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, she has to buy in to what you have to do. If she does not do, and she doesn't understand it, you're never going to be good. So I am lucky. I was a coach before I met my wife, and that was one of the things that she was a competitor. So that's, I married up, and I don't lie when people see my wife, they're like, damn, Timmy T, what up? I'm like, she was a competitor, so she understands what I do. So, we brought up two kids understanding you're not going to see daddy. So like a normal game week, if we're in season, I learned this from Coach Harbaugh. Even though I'm an Ohio guy, I love the guy. I learned a lot from him. I spent a lot of time with him. He taught me one thing, way back when he was at Stanford. I think he was at Stanford. He came to one of my practices in Florida and he said, Coach, he didn't ask about a player. He goes, what do you do in the morning? I really like your practice. I think you're a great coach. What do you do in the mornings? And I'm like, Coach, I'm here earlier. And he's like, you need to take your kids to school. You need to take your kids to school because you ain't going to see them at night. You need to learn how to take your kids to school, get them ready, get them breakfast, wake them up, let your wife sleep in, take care of your wife like that. She's going to have all evening. She's going to have weekends. Just take care of your kids in the morning. So I do that. I get them up, do all that type of stuff, my kids, the football players know that. And I think it helps because they love my kids because they know I'm a part of their life. So wake them up, take them to school, get them fed, get them out the door. And then that's when the whole day starts. So, I'm 24/7 minded. Every high school coach has a day job, but I'm blessed to have great administration. So, they trust me to get my job done. And I get results for them inside of a school. So I raise money for them. So I do those types of things and they don't bother me as long as I'm doing my job. They trust me. So I do a lot of football throughout the day. I get a lot of things done for my assistants so they can be family men. So I try to take on, that's why I don't lose assistants, my core group of assistants, because I don't overwork them. I do a lot of work for an assistant coach. So when they can have a family, so their wives, like me, actually. I'm not the guy going home. I'm there first, and I'm leaving last. So we do all those things, and we work well as a team. But the season's long. We've played, 2019. It was the only year we haven't been to the state championship in the last 9 years, but we went to the state semifinals. So it was just one of those situations where, we're the game before the state championship, so we played 15 weeks instead of 16 weeks. So how is 16 weeks now? So, the thing you got to be able to do is those coaches and you're going to be late on Sundays. You're going to be late on Mondays. You're not going to see your family. Spend time with them in the mornings. Tuesdays are later. Wednesday, I'll get you home after practice. And Thursdays, your typical walkthrough type situation. A little different than it was back in the day, but you're home early. And Fridays, game day, and you're back at it. Saturday, I'll wake my kids up, and I'm at the school by 8 a.m. And it just starts all over again. So you have to have a great wife.
That's how you win.
If you don't have a great wife and you don't have great assistants that have wives that understand.
Yes. It's the same in the business world. Everything
it is
right now is like, man, I can relate. Same thing over here. I had a mentor of mine. I won't mention his name, but he also was a high level football coach. And I was asking him he was giving me the schedule, and he had them coming in for film as coaches on Sunday. And I said, well, how do you handle with, the family or the spouses or, challenges? And he said, I do the best I can. The game requires what the game requires to win. And I would tell him respectfully, either you got the wrong job or you might have the wrong wife. And I don't know which one it is. That's up for you to decide. I don't know. But
very
the
true.
game is what the game
good
is.
advice. Good advice right there.
So crazy schedule, crazy, a lot of work that like when you look at that schedule, back up Saturday morning after Friday night lights, all of the things that you're talking about, that makes sense as to, what it takes in order to win. You mentioned Harbaugh, Tress, is there a couple things that you could point out from maybe mentors or coaches that you've had that you've adopted? Can you give a couple people?
Yeah, I try to, Tress is the ultimate mentor. Everyone knows that, every time I'm talking to someone. I mean, obviously, you talk to Tress about me. So, Tress is, the closest thing to a second father. Love my dad. He was my best friend. He's the greatest relationship in the world. He's up in heaven now. But, Tress was that second guy that I could have done anything. It wasn't always football. When it comes to the football side of things, there's been so many guys that I try to just go and listen. Good coaches listen more than they talk. So with the college coaches that I try to talk to, I just try to go and listen. I've grown really, really close with Ryan Day. And it's not because I don't even pay attention to his everyone goes down there for offense and learning all this different stuff. I don't even pay attention to that. I like to just go into the staff meetings and watch how he manages and watches. He got some really, really high profile kids. They get the best receivers in the country. I watched how he handles high profile kids because we have high profile kids. So it's just one of those situations where Mark Stoops down at Kentucky is another one. When he was an assistant at Florida State, I used to go up to him when I was in Florida. He was at Florida State, and those kind of guys, Narduzzi over at Pitt. He had a rough year, but Pat was, I grew up with his sister in Youngstown before they moved away after his dad, left Youngstown State. So I've known Pat since I've been a little kid riding my bike around the north side of Youngstown. I love just going and listening into different philosophies on how you do things, because everyone can go nowadays and get on and find the greatest plays and different things like that. You want to put yourself around great men. You want to put yourself around people that, stick to the grind and just don't look for the easy answers. So those kind of guys, I try to emulate a little bit more and more. And some of them, I find myself that the longer I'm coaching is I'm older than some of them. And, some people have too big of an ego where, I'll go listen, to a good young coach that has great philosophy and he's learned from some great people. To me, it's, you got to put your ego aside and be able to listen and learn more than talking and doing those things.
Speaking of egos and high profile players, how have you been able to manage that? What advice would you give to people on managing the balance of, we have a team, but then you got high profile players, not just them, but just a lot of times, especially at that age, comes with big egos. How do you manage and coach something like that?
So here's the biggest problem with young coaches, or it could be an older coach that never had a high profile kid. There's a reason they're that good. They want to be coached harder than everybody else. They do. There's a reason, Calvin Ridley was one of my kids. He's an unbelievable wide receiver in the NFL right now. When Calvin was a sophomore, he was really, really good. But he was really, really good for a reason. Diamante Traynor was a starting tailback this year at Kentucky. Unbelievable football player. Ran the ball for Ohio State last year. There's a reason they're that good. They want more than the average kid. The problem is coaches think they're going to lose a kid like that if they don't give them what they want. In reality is that kid wants discipline more than the average kid. They want it. They just have to trust you. It's all about a trust thing. So if they know that you have their best interest in mind, you're going to guide them through nowadays NIL, portal, recruiting, and you're going to be the voice in their ear that's going to be tough, but you're going to hold them to a standard higher than other people are. They'll trust you. And once they trust you, you can do basically anything. I mean, you could be 1980s, 70s
Hardcore
on your best player. I mean, you could be hardcore because they want it. They do. And too many young coaches and too many coaches that haven't been in that situation are afraid because they're afraid, oh, if I say the wrong thing, they're going to leave. Or they're going to go find a coach that's, no, that is a 100% complete opposite when it comes to your best players. They want to be better than everybody in the state of California or Florida. There's Ohio kids that are the greatest in the country. They want the same thing. They want to be saying, hey, I'm a better corner than the kid in Miami. And they want you to push them. They want those types of things. They're kids. So if you're going to be nice and you're going to pat them on the back and you're going to give them extra cleats and extra gloves and you're going to do and not make them run, give them excuses so the whole team can see it. Yeah, then they're going to take advantage of you. They're smart kids. There's a thing, you grew up the same way. I'd rather be street smart than smart, book smart. So, and usually your best football players are street smart. They grew up a different way. And so they'll take advantage of a young guy or someone that's, doing that type of thing, but they really don't want that. They don't respect that coach in the end. We have some really good players, obviously, at Hoban and have gone on to big time Power 5 and great, and got a couple kids getting drafted this year. And they come back and they tell the stories about when you dog cussed them out and you were, the hardest on them. They appreciate those things. They really do. And those are the ones that
next level.
Yeah, and if you're soft on them, that's and they don't respond the right way. They're not a dog. They're not someone that was going to be that high end. Someone pumped them up a little bit too much on the internet.
Yeah, if they can't handle it already, they ain't going to be able to handle it down.
No, and then they're never going to win you that game anyways.
Love it. So, here, when I hear you say this stuff, I'm thinking, man, what great. I bet you a lot of your players are killing it just in business right now and in life, period, because that mindset that you're instilling in them, not only will it help them on the football field, but it'll help them off the football field. And what I've found here, is we end up having a ton of athletes in my business, and we're sales based and, leadership. We build teams and stuff like that. A lot of former athletes crush it, in our business. And it's not even on purpose. Some people, well, you only recruit athletes. That's not the truth. I think I just build it and it attracts that, and the athletes end up doing the best. Why do you think athletes transition so well into business?
Oh, this is a conversation me and Coach Tress have all the time. So this what really drives me crazy. And if there's one of my teachers listening, some of them will love it and some of them will get really mad at me. There's a reason athletes, with the right people around them, do exactly what you're saying. Is they understand that you have to do things when people aren't watching, and it's not just about going 9 to 5, and it's about the extra things. It's about the extra work you have to put in. When they get that discipline inside of them at a young age, at the high school level, some of them even earlier with great parents have come through. Athletes know what it takes to do more. So they, especially when they're really, really successful, and they understand that, good is not good enough. They have that mindset, like we talked about, being a little bit sick in the mind, that you just constantly want to be better than the next person. You have that competition in you. That's what athletes do. So, I'm always talking to, our administration and different things like that. And, me and Tress have talked about this, and, he gets upset when people are like, well, you don't want to hold too many athletes, because then you don't have the academic side of things. No, if you have good teachers and you just like you have good coaches, you're going to draw that athlete and teach him what he needs to know and be competitive with him in math class. And you will see the kid in math class with a really good teacher who was a C student, all of a sudden an A student, because that teacher knew how to get the competitiveness out of him when it comes to the classroom too. So when he's sitting there taking a test, he comes back with a B, feeling a little bit good about himself. He looks over and the kid next to him has an A. He gets mad. He's like, no, well, I'm better than him. And you see that, and that's what you go through in the real world. That, when you're trying to get the best people possible, it's not necessarily the resume that, I'm looking at this, this kid's transcripts and, he's this, and this, but then all of a sudden I'm looking at another kid, the grades might not be as well. He's still a smart kid, but, he just hasn't been taught correctly. But, boy, he's doing this. He does this in the community. He does this. He's not just doing what's told of him. He's doing 10 times more. That kid's going to be that much more successful for you. He might not graduate with a 4.0, but he's going to outwork everybody, and he's going to do everything he possibly can to learn what he needs to learn to be successful. And that's why, in your line of work and my line of work, when I see, we have an unbelievable, he'll remain nameless. He's an athlete, college athlete, young guy, and he came into our special ed program, and within 3 years, they're so afraid to lose him because he's just such a hardworking guy. And he attributes to that what he learned playing college football and high school football. So the kids are drawn to him because they know he's going to be there early. So the kids can come in early and get extra help. They know after school when other people are leaving, because that's the time their contract says they can leave, he's there for 2 more hours with a family, a young wife that understands coaching and what his philosophies are. But all of a sudden, he's the favorite guy. Everybody kids that aren't athletes are like, well, I want to go to him for tutoring, and it's because of that work ethic you get from being successful and a good coach. Or we have some unbelievable teachers at Hoban that I pat on the back every single time I see them, because they understand that. They understand that, it's not good to get a B. You're an A student, and they'll get mad at you, and they'll come to me and saying he's not working to his potential. And the kid's looking at me going, "Coach, I got a B plus," and I'm like, "You're not understanding what she's saying." It's like when you're the center trying to down block on somebody. Like we scored, but that wasn't good. You understand that, but you don't understand that she's trying to make you understand you're an A. So I just think the same way as you.
Great analogy you're giving them. You're coaching people to their potential instead of just what that immediate result is.
Yeah, because some kids, they have deficiencies and they were born that way. God, that's between them and God. Where there's some kids I will celebrate because a teacher will come to me and go, "Coach, it's unbelievable. He got a C plus. He got a C plus, and when he walked in the door, he didn't know anything." And you make sure you tell the whole team how hard he's working. And and the other kids are like, "Well, I got a B plus. You're yelling at me." I'm like, because he should be a D. That's what God gave him. But he's working so hard. He got a C plus. He's almost at a B right now. You're lazy. God gave you the ability. You could walk into a classroom and get a B without any work. You should be the A kid sitting in the front of the classroom.
How have you been able to adapt to coaching different personalities and skill sets? Do you treat everybody the same? Do you think you got to coach people differently based on their personalities?
You have to. I mean, I was. So it's not like, a lot of the coaches will say, well, yeah, you have to nowadays. Jim Tressel talked to me different than he talked to Jake Andreades, the running back. Adrian Brown was treated different, than I was. So, you have to be able to do that, but you can't do that. That's what when we talked earlier about the players coach. But if you don't know the kids and you're not putting in the time, you don't know. So you don't know that kid's home situation where, he's rolling in, you say a meeting starts at this time I had two great kids in Florida, unbelievable kids. And sometimes they'd come in at late on Saturday mornings. And none of the kids could figure out why I wasn't making them do bear crawls and do anything else like that. Meetings started at 9 o'clock. They were rolling in at 9. They weren't. They weren't 9:05 or anything. They were 9. But everyone else, you had to be there at 8:50. And they couldn't figure out what I was yelling at them. And finally, I remember telling them they didn't get it until the banquet. We had an unbelievable year down there. And I went through what they did in the morning. They took 3 different public buses, which spanned over a 2-hour period. They were up before any one of those kids were even close to being up, ate a breakfast, got on 3 different connections just to be there at 9 o'clock in the morning, and got dropped off on a public bus right beforehand. Why would I be yelling at those 2 kids? They're putting in more work before 6 a.m. when the kids that were there 10 minutes earlier complaining why I'm not
yelling. The buy-in from the others, on the team, unless, if they didn't know that, but you were hard on them about time and not those couple, how did you keep that synergy?
The biggest thing that you got to be able to do is when you're dealing with kids is everybody's an individual. And when you preach that from the very beginning, the trust is the biggest thing. So those kids trusted there was a reason I was not doing that, because they all have their own situation. If you don't know your kids and you don't know them individually as kids, because they know there's certain things that coach is doing for me. You could be the richest kid in the world, but your parents are gone 6 months of the year and you have no parental guidance. You have money, but you're in the same boat as the kid that grew up in the ghetto. You still don't have a parent. So they know I'm doing it for them. They trust the fact that he ain't yelling at them. There got to be a reason, because he does it for me, maybe in a different way. But there's that trust. And if you don't have the trust of the kids, that's what it all comes back to. That if you just show up on August 1st when 2-a-days start and you try to start coaching and you're starting to try to be hard with these kids and do different things, they don't trust you. They haven't seen you at workouts. They haven't seen you, you haven't been checking on their grades. I got an unbelievable staff who don't coach a position that every single week check on grades. Assistant principals are calling players in. They know we care. So then you can do that. You can do that because there's a trust.
Gotcha. Do you think you mentioned it's not that kids are getting soft, that you think kids are still tough. Do you think you can teach toughness?
You can't. The only thing you can, because it's just you can't teach heart. That's the only thing that you can't teach. If they don't have it in their heart to want to be good, you can teach toughness through drills, through more than drills, the mental warfare you have to be able to go through. So, Jim Tressel is a lot of things. He is. He's a great coach, and he has a great, everything he does. But his staff, and whether he was at Youngstown State or at Ohio State, and he'll never take credit for it. He coached mental toughness and mental warfare from coaches to players better than anybody I've ever seen, on the same likes of Nick Saban. If you've ever been to a Nick Saban practice and you ever watch what he does in meetings, and there's a rhyme and reason for everything he's doing. He's not doing it to be mean. So with the mental toughness you can coach, the kid will become tougher on a football field. But if he doesn't have the heart to want to put in the work and to go through and to understand, it's never going to work. And kids that have the heart, that want to be great, they separate themselves, because the only difference between 1998 when you were playing and 2024 are parents. That's the only difference. They're the ones saying, "You don't be mean to Johnny."
Right.
Why are you yelling at him? He looked good to me.
Yep.
And when you separate kid from parent, and again, it's a trust thing. When the kid can know, he's not going to say it out loud because we don't want him to be disrespectful to the parent. But when they get in a car and saw something in practice, what was he yelling at you about? What why, I'm going to talk to him. And the kid looks at his mom and says, no, you ain't. I was wrong.
Right.
Then you got that kid. That kid's going to look at his parents and say, everything's okay. You stay clapping in the stands. I'll handle me and coach. And when you have that trust, the kids do that. That's always a fun thing to be able to see.
One of my favorites. I love watching Saban's stuff, clips and stuff. I saw Saban define toughness, and he gave an example. He said, down in the South in Florida, where you're near the water, they have the price of windows to protect you from hurricane windows, that the price of it is based off the toughness of the window, and the toughness of the window is determined by how much can you handle without breaking.
Yep.
And that's the value of the window. And that's how he would describe toughness, is how much can you handle without, what does it take to break you? You know what I mean? What does it take to break you? What advice would you give to young players, listening, coming up, nowadays, if they want to be a great player, if they want to make it to the next level in anything? What advice would you give to them, in a sense of hard work versus talent? I think talent can only get you so far. What advice would you give to young aspiring players?
I would say to the young kids coming up is, I heard someone say this. I don't know who said it, but I try to tell the kids this all the time, is when young kids come into the building is you are not the main character in this story. You have to understand that you're a part of it, but you're not the main one. And no matter how good you think you are, when an 8th grader walks in here, I tell them all the same thing. There is no such thing as a great 8th grader in the history of football. The greatest of all time were not great in 8th grade. No one's going to ask that question. Saban says that all the time. No one asks about, the NFL coaches never went to him and said, hey, how was his freshman year?
Right.
Right. How was he as a freshman?
The outcome.
They never even asked that question.
Yep.
So I always tell kids, when they're coming in, you're not as good as you think. I'll let you know when you're good. And your goal is to get as close to great as possible, because when you become great, that's college. That's the college coach's job, is to make you great. And if you're blessed to ever become elite, whether you're on the practice squad or you're the backup or the main guy playing for the Browns or the Steelers, it don't matter. You're elite at that point. But you're not elite in 8th grade. And too many people are telling kids that. So we try to just bring their head down a little bit. And, I tell to all young kids is don't believe the hype. Don't believe what people are telling you. You always can be better the next day. Whatever you do, be better tomorrow than you were today. And if young kids get that in their mind and start to believe that, that's when you get the kids you asked me about. Those kids, we always joke at Hoban, because we have kids that come in as freshmen and are backups on our freshman team. And then by the time they're seniors, some other coach at another school is going, oh, come on, man, how hard is it to coach? He's an all-star. I'm like, he's an all-star. He came from your community. You didn't even know who he was because he was a backup. He wasn't good enough. You didn't even know who he was. He came to us as a backup, but he believed in his head he could be great, and he worked as if he was great. And now all of a sudden you're calling him an all-star. Man. So I always laugh about that. Like, so if that's all we tell young kids coming in is whatever someone told you, mommy and daddy, grandpa, grandma telling you how great you are, you ain't there yet. You can be, and we're going to help you get there. The teachers are going to help you get there academically. But as long as the adults in the world stop doing what they're doing with these 7th and 8th graders and, oh man, this is the greatest, this is the great. Come on. I mean, like, I remember Lamar Jackson. I was down in Florida when he was playing 7th to 8th grade football. I remember watching him. That dude was good. He wasn't great. That's Lamar Jackson. He's the MVP of the NFL. He wasn't great. And I don't know him personally, never met him. But I guarantee you, he had the mindset when he was in 7th or 8th grade, when people were telling him how great he was, he didn't believe one damn thing they said. He was going to prove he was going to be the greatest one day. But we just try to, any young kid we try to talk to, all the coaches say the same thing. All young coaches have to understand, if you're a head coach, your assistants better be on the same page as you and saying the same thing to the young kids walking in the door, and everything will end up all right. You ain't gonna scare anybody away. They want hard work.
Man, I gotta tell you, just to be respectful of your time. This time has flown by almost an hour. I could talk to you like this for another hour.
It's like the good old days, buddy.
It's real easy to see why you've been so successful. The more that I hear you talk and I hear your philosophies and I hear the foundation, I would have loved to play for you. And I was blessed to have a great coach,
Oh, yeah.
But to play for a coach like that, I'm sure they all realize how lucky and how blessed they are. This me calling you and reaching out to you, it happened through an argument, a debate that I had with some friends, some former Steelers players, and we were at dinner and we were talking about Youngstown football versus Akron football, and I was telling them about Ursuline, and they start bragging about Hoban and all these state championships and stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute, let me look this up. I'm pretty sure that's my guy. I said, the only reason why you guys are that good down there is you had to get a Youngstown coach. So I took credit for you. And that reminded me that I had to get you on the podcast with us.
And hey, the biggest thing is, listen, man, it's been a long time since me and you talked, and your listeners got to realize something. So I was a young guy when me and you met. I was, 22 years old.
Right out of college.
You and I could name, I won't, but I could name about 3 other of your teammates. We knew back then you were going to be successful. I still remember me and Nidzwicki, that's what we were talking about a year ago. You were going to be successful in anything you did, because when we walked into the locker room, you knew knew more than you. You were a sponge. The reason you're successful now is because you were that way as a high school kid. You listened to us. You asked us 1,000 questions. What about this? What about this? I remember you coming to me, hey, Timmy T, like, why? What about this? What about this? What about this? And there was a bunch of kids. I haven't followed them, but my guess is they're not as successful as you, that probably had a little bit more hype, in your era of playing at Ursuline. And anytime I said something or did something, they were like, oh, man, I could do it better than that. And it was all, I already have everything. And the people that listen, like yourself and a couple of your classmates, are very successful nowadays. They do follow some of you, and we talk about you. That's why you're successful. And that's why you're doing what you're doing.
Thank you. The blessing, I think, and that was, I was never big enough and never good enough to not be coachable and to outwork people. That was the gift, is not being big enough and not being quite, the best, but always being good made me push to, you had to be coachable and you had to outwork people. And that was the only way to get through. But I want to come check you out this year, man. I'm going to try to get a hold of a schedule.
Hook me up. You got my number. Give me a call.
All right. Well, I appreciate you. Congratulations on all your success, and keep the standards high. I know you will. Let's get it.
All right, brother. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of the GRINDcast. Coach Timmy Tyrrell, Akron Hoban. Thanks for joining us on another episode of GRINDcast. Get ready. It's a new day.
Thanks.